Welcome to another quick review from Ultimate DIY. A lot of questions I get are how do I edit? What kind of a computer do I use as an editing machine? And up until now, I have been using a gaming PC, which a gaming PC is pretty good for editing because you use a lot of the same things. But I am building a specific machine just to be able to edit. So I'm going to go over quickly some of the parts that I'm putting in that machine. So if you're trying to build an editing machine or even a high-powered gaming machine, a lot of these parts are going to be the same. The first thing I'm going to start with is I have a full tower case, and this full tower is made by Thermaltake, and I have written down a lot of the model numbers to make sure I get it right, but this is Thermaltake View 71TG, and this is the RGB version, meaning that the fans will light up and you can change those light colors. I do like this because it is got tempered glass all the way around, so if it breaks, you're not going to get hurt. It's just going to shatter. But it's very thick tempered glass, so it does not shatter easily. So you'll simply remove these little screws and you can take the front off or you can take the top off. If you remove the two side screws on each side in the front, they have hinges in the back and they swivel open, which makes it extremely easy and quick to work on the unit. Now, I wanted a full tower because I want a lot of room and I'm putting a lot of hard drives in here. And there's a whole rack in the center that's going to be all hard drives, kind of like old school in a way. So that is my case. I do like, by the way, all the controls in the front and you can control everything. And there's a ton of things on that, but that's the case. Now, the next thing that I use is going to be the Asus ProArt X670E Creator Wi-Fi board. The Wi-Fi is built in, which I really like being a creator because so I can Wi-Fi directly from my laptop or my phone directly to the computer and I don't have to hook up with lines. There's a whole ton or slew of things in this for a creator. One of the things, it has Thunderbolt connections. If you're not familiar with Thunderbolt, Thunderbolt is an extremely fast connection so that you can connect to hard drives and things and with high speed. So it saves you a lot of time as a creator. It has a lot of really good, oh, and by the way, this is for the Ryzen. So make sure that you are getting the correct board for your CPU. I'm using a Ryzen in here, but you need to make sure that if you're using Intel that you're getting the right one because they use different sockets for those processors. So make sure you have the right board for your processor. Some of the things that are really cool, and I wrote some of those down here because there's so many, is that one of the things that I like, it uses the DDR5. If you're using a Ryzen, you're going to use the Expo. And with Expo, I can go in and tweak my memory to speed it up and things like that so that I get the most out of my memory. So that's one of the things I like DDR5. Some of the other things, it has USB 4 ports, which are very fast. Of course, I said the Thunderbolt. And one of the big ones, this one has 4 of the M2 slots, meaning that I can take like my Samsung drives, and I'll go over that in a second and show it to you, but I can put 4 of them on the board itself before I even get to putting other hard drives in the unit. And those are built on the board. This will go up to 128 gigs. And speaking of that, I'll go ahead and go over the memory. The memory that I'm using, there's a couple of different memories you can use, like this RGB DDR5 right here, which would work in here just as well. But what I'm actually going to put in this unit is going to be the TCreate 64 gigabytes, 6,000 megahertz RAM. Now the TCreate is made by creators for creators. It's not only quick, but it has a high latency, which makes it a little bit more stable when it comes to your RAM. It also has a technology built into the surface of this RAM that dissipates heat very well. So it's a very stable RAM, which is what I want when I'm dealing with creator type stuff. So also at 64 gigs, you have 4 slots on that motherboard. I can add 64 more, just 2 more sticks, and I've got the maximum gigabytes of RAM for my system. So keep that in mind. If you think you're going to want the maximum RAM, don't go get 232 sticks because you're liable to have to throw those away later if you want to go up. Now, if you have two 32s and you think you may only be going to 64, then you're fine. But if you think you're ever going to max your system, then go ahead and get your 64s to start, because then you just got to buy two more sticks and you're done. So a nice thing to keep in mind. Now, when we're talking about the actual hard drives, this is the Samsung 980 Pro. This one is the 2 terabyte. I'm using 4 of these on that motherboard. I'm going to use 2 1 terabytes, 1 2 terabyte, and then I'm using 1 4. Now, my first 1 terabyte is going to be for my operating system and my DaVinci Resolve and my main programs. That's going to be on its own. I'm going to have another 1 terabyte that will be nothing but my catch files. So everything from my editing software on my catch files will go onto that drive. And that gets used a lot. It's kind of like a scratch drive. So if that drive wears out because it's being used constantly and it crashes, my main system is on a whole nother drive. So it's protected. The other drives, one will be a working drive as I bring my material in and I work from that drive because it's very fast, and I'll be able to render and everything much quicker while I'm working in DaVinci Resolve. And then I'll have a fourth drive that'll just be backup programs and things like that, or things that I want to save. In the long run, what I'll ultimately do is I'm going to have other hard drives in the unit, probably a 20 terabyte or maybe a little bit more. I'm not sure if I want to go high terabyte or if I'm going to break it into several small just for redundancy and make sure that I don't lose everything all at one time. But I'll have several drives in here that will be my long-term storage. If you're using a regular hard drive, a mechanical disk, you really kind of want those on a disk that's not being powered up all the time. The more you power it up, the more you have a problem, or the potential of having a problem. So a lot of those may be on a NAS system or something outside of my unit. So that is my hard drives, that is my memory, that is my motherboard in my case. Now, some of the other things you're going to need, I've got this power supply. Now, my power supply is the Seasonic Vertex GX 1200 watt system. And this comes with a 10-year warranty. It's a very good power supply. The company that's doing this, they make a lot of power supplies for other companies, and other companies stamp their name on the top of it or what have you. It's a good brand. This is the 80 plus series. Now, how you're going to figure out your wattage on your system is you're going to take your CPU, you're going to take your GPU, you're going to take all of your hard drives, you're going to take everything that is internal on your PC and add up that wattage and see where you are. And then you're going to add 10% on top of that. Now, I am way over the 10%. I probably could have got by with 1,000 very easily, and that was probably more than I needed. But I don't know ultimately how many hard drives I plan on putting in this system, and I don't want to pull a power supply later and have to buy another one. So I went ahead and opted for the 1200 because I know I'm adding a lot of drives. So keep that in mind when you do your power supply. So now the next thing that's very important is your CPU. Now, I'm using the Ryzen, and a lot of this is going to be determined by your motherboard or vice versa. So you need to make sure those two things match. Now, on the Ryzen, I'm doing the AMD Ryzen 9, and this one is the 7950X. A very good processor, very fast. This one is going to have the 16 cores, 32 threads. Now, all that really is telling you is that you can, it's like having multiple processors built into one processor, and it allows you to do a lot of different functions simultaneously, which is great. So you want to, especially if you're a video editor or a creator, you're going to want to have a processor with as many cores as you can afford to buy. And you won't regret that in the long run. Now, a lot of people who use DaVinci Resolve will tell you that your processor is not necessarily as important as your GPU. But I'm here to tell you, I think they work together. And depending on other programs and things that you have, if you're building a good system, go ahead and put a good processor in. Don't skimp on that. I think you'll definitely appreciate that later. Now, when it comes to your CPU, you're going to have to cool that CPU. There's a lot of ways you can do that. They have little heat sinks, they have fans that mount on top, but these newer CPUs put out or produce an awful lot of heat. So nowadays, most people are using a water-cooled system, a radiator system like this one here. So you're going to notice that most of the parts that I put into this unit are made by ASUS. I like their products. They're very good quality, heavy duty products. And when you're putting in a water cooling system, how that actually works is it's going to have something very much like a car. It's going to have a radiator in it. And it has a hose and it runs and it'll attach to your CPU. And when you get this unit, it's going to have a bunch of different attachment brackets and options depending on the CPU that you have. But this will keep your CPU cool. And by doing that, your system is going to run much more efficient with less problems. So be sure you have a really good cooling system if you're using any of the new CPUs. Now, outside of the CPU and your cooling system, the next major thing that you're going to need is a good GPU. So whether you're a game player or whether you are a creator, you're going to want something like the GeForce RTX. This is the 3090 series. And the reason I picked the 3090 series is two reasons. It's an overclockable system on this particular model, and it also has 24 gigabytes of built-in RAM. So when you're working with graphics, you want as much RAM as possible on your graphics card. So get the best graphics card or GPU that you can afford. And this one also has 3 fans already built in to help it stay cool. Okay, guys, so we covered pretty much all the major components outside of your operating system that you're going to want to get, like Windows 11 or whatever, and you can get those on a little flash drive. But that covers most of the basic components you're going to need to build yourself a really good editing or gaming type computer. So I hope this helps, and we will see you guys on the next review.